Hello, hi, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Zohaib Kumar, and I'll be hosting today's session, and the topic is going to be careers in pharmacy. So we have two pharmacists with us who we're lucky to have. And what I wanted to do is maybe start with an introduction. If each of you could just give your name, your background, where you work, and where you went to school for pharmacy. I'll turn it over to Manur first.
Thank you so much. First of all, assalamu alaikum, everyone. I just want to say it's an honor to be here right now. I really appreciate this opportunity to speak to, people like yourself and everyone, and the youth especially, because, mentorship is so important nowadays. But regardless, let me introduce myself first. My name is Manur. I am a pharmacist at LIJ Valley Stream. I graduated from St. John's University. But I am not just only a pharmacist at LIJ Valley Stream, I am also a PGY1 resident. I am completing my residency at LIJ Valley Stream Hospital. Hopefully after completing my PGY1, I'm hoping to pursue a career in pharmaceutical, which we'll talk about later what that is and what that has to do with pharmacy. But I'm really excited to talk to everyone and answer your questions and concerns that you guys might have about pharmacy.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And Brother Shani, do you want to introduce yourself?
Assalamu alaikum. My name is, everyone calls me Shani outside of work. I graduated from St. John's in 2004. I've worked in some of the different areas of pharmacy, such as community, like a Walgreens. I owned a store for a few years, and now I currently work at a psychiatric hospital in Suffolk County. I've been there for about 10 years.
Okay, mashallah. Perfect. Thank you, guys. So we always start with the basics. For people who don't know, what is pharmacy? What is a pharmacist? What do they do? So I'll turn it over to maybe Brother Shani first this time.
Okay. So pharmacy, a large part of it is dealing with medication safety. You make sure that, doctors write prescriptions for patients after seeing them. But for various reasons, not all information is shared. You might get some medicine from, let's just say, your primary care, some from maybe like a GI or like a stomach doctor or somebody else, and they're not always talking to each other. So not all medications are necessarily safe to take together. So one of the biggest aspects in the community side is making sure that medication is safe for somebody to use and not causing them any harm. And the rest is, different things like promoting health, encouraging people to become immunized and, take necessary steps to safeguard their health.
Perfect. Manur, Sister Manur?
To be honest, Brother Shani did an amazing job at explaining what we do. But the only thing I would add on is that pharmacists are really known for creating like appropriate patient care plans, and they work hand in hand with a lot of other healthcare professionals that include nurses, PA, doctors. So we're very involved when it comes to patient care. But on top of that, we're really known for promoting safe use of medications. That's basically pharmacy. But outside of that, I just want to mention a fun fact that patients actually see pharmacists more than they see any doctor. So remember that whenever you go to the pharmacy.
MashaAllah, that's really good. My friend, he was a pharmacist and he graduated from pharmacy school, and he always used to tell me, he said, pharmacists know more about the medicines than the doctors. The doctors could end up prescribing you the wrong medicine, the wrong dosage. So it's good to have pharmacists double check those medications and make sure it makes sense for you to take those medications. That's always something he emphasized as a point of pride. Continuing, so now we know a little bit about what is pharmacy, what is a pharmacist. Are all pharmacists the same? I know some pharmacists work in like hospitals, some work at a CVS or others. Can you help us understand the different types of pharmacy fields that are out there? And I'll turn it over to Sister Manur first.
Thank you. So I do have a bit of experience when it comes to working in different fields of pharmacy. I actually worked at Walgreens as a pharmacy intern, not as a pharmacist. I think I forgot to mention this in my introduction. I actually just graduated from St. John's University. I'm a graduate of the class of 2021. But however, in regards to my experience at Walgreens, pharmacists are very hands-on. They're dispensing medications, they're counseling patients, and it is amazing. I actually loved retail. It's kind of known as retail in the pharmacy community. Outside of that, we also have hospital, which is where I am now. And I also was an intern at LIJ New Hyde Park, a pharmacy intern. So I also got exposure to pharmacy and hospital in that sense. And in that area, once again, pharmacists are working hands on hands with the doctors, nurses. They're verifying prescriptions and sending them up to the floors. I promise you, every single day that I was there, pharmacists were the ones basically catching so many mistakes and making such an impact that it actually inspired me to go into hospital, which is where I am right now. I just started as a resident, so I'm actually getting that exposure firsthand. I am working with these doctors now instead of just putting in medications, setting medications up. I'm verifying prescriptions, and it is an amazing feeling to know the impact that I'm making. But another field that pharmacy goes into is actually pharmaceutical. Now that is where there's a lot of research involved, and that's where you work behind the scenes on getting a product onto the shelf. So when you think of retail and hospital, you're working with this product and dispensing it. Where pharmaceutical, pharmacists play a role in actually getting that product out there onto the shelf. So pharmacy is very versatile. So it's amazing career to go into. You always have something to look forward to, or really something to really expand your career on. It can be in hospital, transition to retail, transition to pharmaceutical, and that's the most amazing part about pharmacy, besides the patient care impact you make.
Perfect. Thank you. Brother Shani, do you want to add to that?
Yeah. So Sister Manor covered very well the aspects of like community and hospital and some of the things related to pharma. One of the pros in pharmacy is that there are a lot of different career options, and they don't necessarily teach you about all of them in school even. There are things like nuclear pharmacy, which is like a sub specialty, and that has like its own unique qualifications outside of just being a pharmacist with a license and all the other things. There's extra classes, post-education that go into that. There are things in pharma like medical affairs, beyond just like research, where you are the one sending out information about new drugs and new treatments to physicians and people who are in charge of care to see that like, hey, well, maybe this is better than what is currently out there. Why don't we educate people about this and promote like a higher standard of care? If something new came out that is better, then that should be what's used, as opposed to something that is very old and not maybe as effective. So there are a multitude of, and that's just like the tip of the iceberg. There's several other careers within the pharmacy space. People generally think of pharmacists as either the guy behind the Walgreens counter or like the guy in the lab coat in the basement of the hospital. And there's a lot more to it than that. And, that's one of the things that people don't realize, like as they're going through the schooling for it, that they can do a lot more than just those things, and they should try to.
Perfect, Masha. No, it's really good help. It's really helpful for us to know the different types of fields that are out there. For those that are interested in becoming a pharmacist, you guys have described it so well. You've sold them. They said, I want to become a pharmacist now. What are the next steps? So let's say they're a high school student. What are the steps to become a pharmacist? Brother Shani, do you want to start?
So the admission process is dependent on the school. Some schools require you to complete an undergrad degree, take the pharmacy college admission test or the PCATs, and then apply to that pharmacy program for that school, where you're doing additional number of years of school, depending on the program. It's 3 or 4 usually. And then you graduate, with your PharmD, like Sister Manor has. I have my bachelor's. I was one of the last years that had the option to take the bachelor's, and I did at the time. And The others are like other PharmD programs are 6 years direct of school. In the first 2 years, you're taking your basic sciences. And then from your third year onwards, you're taking the classes that center around the different areas of pharmacy and like medications and usage. And then you're spending part of that last year doing rotations at different sites and like kind of working with different people who can like mentor you in that field.
Okay. So, Sister Manu, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, sure. So I actually was one of the privileged ones to go through a 6-year program, which is where basically I actually didn't have to take the PCAT. I didn't have to complete undergrad. All I did was do 2 years of undergrad and go straight into pharmacy school. And that was at St. John's University. Now, St. John's isn't the only program in New York City specifically that offers that. There's also LIU. But outside of that, I am not well aware of other programs. But it is very often that you are required to do 4 years undergrad and then take the PCAT and then apply for admission to a pharmacy school. But to really kind of encourage students who are like in high school to really want to see if pharmacy is for them or not, I encourage you to actually volunteer at one. They would love that. I mean, there's not one pharmacy I know that wouldn't want extra hands to help them out because every pharmacy is very busy. But you can offer your hands to work at an independent store. I know they would love that. And that's where you can get exposure to see if pharmacy is really what you want to do. And you can take that step forward by getting that degree in pharmacy.
Mashallah. So if I could just recap, there looks like there's 2 major routes to get into pharmacy school. One is you get into a program like St. John's, for example, where you get in and it's a full 6-year program. The first 2 years is regular college. You're taking all the same classes all your other friends are taking, but then you move into the pharmacy program for the next 4 years. And then after you're done, you get your PharmD and you're considered a pharmacist, right? The second route is you go to any school you want to for a 4 years bachelor's degree. And do you have to take specific classes? Like for MCAT, you have to take very specific classes before you can sit for the MCAT exam. Is it the same with pharmacy? You have to sit and take very specific classes before you can sit for the exam. And then you apply for the exam and it's an additional 2 years, or you said 3 years, or it depends on the school. Can you just elaborate and clarify that for people?
So actually, LIU, even though it's a 6-year program, you have to take your PCAT and that to continue into the 4-year pharmacy school program in the 6 years. In those 2 years at LIU, if I'm correct, you are basically getting those prereqs ready to apply to pharmacy school. And then you take the PCAT. So yes, it is very common that in undergrad or in those 2 years at LIU, you are required to take those classes that will allow you to sit for the PCAT. And then obviously if you successfully pass the PCAT, then you can apply to pharmacy school and hopefully attend one.
Okay. And is it after 2 years or after 4 years you can sit for that PCAT exam?
So I'm so sorry. I hope I'm not confusing you, but it is 4 years often, but LIU alone, the Long Island University, is an exception where there you only have to do 2 years and then sit for the PCAT. Whereas St. John's, you don't have to do any prereqs, no PCAT, you go straight into pharmacy school. But like I said, those schools, 2 schools are an exception. Everywhere else is very common that you do 4 years undergrad. You could do whatever degree you want, but as long as you get those prereqs out of the way so that you can sit for the PCAT, and then you can apply for pharmacy school.
And then, Brother Shani, how long is, from your experience, I know it varies by state and by school, for those people who are doing bachelor's and they're saying, I want to become a pharmacist or I want to go into PA or science, I'm not sure which one to go into, but if I get my prereqs in, I sit for that exam, I finish my 4 years of bachelor's, how many more years am I looking forward to of schooling? Can you help elaborate upon that, Brother Shani?
So the bachelor's program is non-existent anymore. Now, anywhere you go to pharmacy school, you become a PharmD. That bachelor's of science program has phased out. So that doesn't really exist anymore in that sense. And all the schools will have their own individualized requirements in terms of years and everything. But everyone, I graduated in 2004. Anyone who graduated 2005 and onward has their PharmD.
can you elaborate on what is a PharmD for all of us non-knowledgeable people? What does it mean to be a PharmD? Can you be called a doctor? Like, can you just elaborate upon that?
So brother Shani can like add on to this about the bachelor's, because I am actually not that well aware. I actually just started meeting individuals who have a bachelor's in pharmacy, and I didn't know that existed. However, but when it comes to PharmD, that's basically you having a doctorate in pharmacy, and that's doctor in pharmacy. You can basically call it like a master's in pharmacy, but you are called a doctor. But with bachelor's, I know there is a bit of a difference, so maybe Brother Shani can speak on that.
So the difference in programs when I had the option was about an extra semester of classes at St. John's and an extra semester of rotations. So, I mean, as far as the educational background, that's what the difference was. And like, for example, like my name tag doesn't say doctor anything. You know, I'm sure Sister Manor's does. And what the PharmD does now is for more roles that are like clinical in their nature, they like to see, like employers will like to see stuff like that. And it's not that the bachelor's has completely phased out, because there's still so many people who have their bachelor's, but like in a sense, they would want to know that you have some expertise in that subject area. Like, let's just say I applied to do like oncology care, cancer care in a place. Since I don't have my PharmD, they would probably want to see that I have experience in that field before saying, you know what, you're our guy. Whereas like somebody with their PharmD, they might say, okay, well, they did extra clinical rotations. They could see from their CV or whatever if any of those rotations encompassed that experience, because they do an extra 5 rotations. And they might say, okay, this person has some prerequisite background and we will teach them the rest.
Perfect. And we did get a question in from the audience, and we do want to remind everybody who's listening, and please go ahead, ask your questions. Don't delay. So Raham asked a question. My question revolves around farm tech. Are all farm techs going to become a pharmacist? How's the day and the day work like and the hours like for that? So maybe you could speak about what is a farm tech. People here, I've heard that term before. How does that relate to pharmacy? Is that a subset of pharmacy? How do you become a farm tech, and how does it relate to becoming a pharmacist?
So I will speak on it a little bit because I was a pharmacy intern for almost 4 years, yes. And my responsibilities basically mirrored what a pharmacy technician does. So a farm tech is basically pharmacy technician, and they're assistants to the pharmacy. They're individuals that are there that basically help do everything that a pharmacist would do except for verifying or counseling. That's the pharmacist's job. But outside of that, when it comes to inventory, when it comes to counting pills, everything else a pharmacy technician can do. If you actually go to Walgreens, it's actually not that common that you'll see the pharmacist at the register. You will instead see a pharmacy intern or a pharmacy technician at the register. Now, in regards to becoming a pharmacist, I know a lot of pharmacy technicians that do it. It's all about being passionate about pharmacy. There are technicians who are happy with their job. They actually don't want to take to the next level, but there's some technicians who feel like they can be pharmacists and they want to become one, and that's when they study. They hope it's actually required to have like a bachelor's, you can say, before applying for a PCAT. So obviously they finished undergrad. Like I said, you can have a degree in anything as long as you just meet the requirements to sit for PCAT. They take the PCAT and then they go to pharmacy school. But it's not that common either because the process, it is quite long. But outside of the work day-to-day hours, it differs between where you work. In a hospital setting, it is like 8-hour shifts, like you work from 7 to 3. But when you're at Walgreens, you can work 12 hours, more than 8 hours, and it just varies depending on where you're working.
Perfect. Brother Shani, do you want to add on to that difference between a farm tech? And if someone's interested in pharmacy, they said, maybe I can try out becoming a farm tech first to see if I like it. Is there Does that make sense? Is a plausible option?
So it only exposes you to that very small space in the pharmacy world of either working in a hospital or like a store, be it an independent or a chain, being a farm tech. It doesn't necessarily expose you to like all the different areas of pharmacy. And while it's a way to find out if those particular spots are what that person is looking for in terms of a career, it doesn't give you the full exposure of what a pharmacist could otherwise do. And I would encourage anyone who is interested in medicine but maybe doesn't want to go, let's just say, the med school route or the PA or nurse practitioner or whatever kind of route, to look at what are the other things a pharmacist can do and see if that kind of suits them. Things like pharma that we talked about, working for a pharmaceutical company, Pfizer, let's just say. You're not going to see farm techs in that space. It's all research scientists, pharmacists, business people, lawyers, and medical affairs type who are all like fairly advanced, like beyond like what a farm tech would be. Farm techs can get a certification to like further like differentiate them or give them like extra roles and responsibilities in like the hospital or the community setting. But that's kind of where it stops for them. And like Sister Manur said, they have like some of the like the labor types of jobs. Like they might be the ones who get the medication bottle from the shelf or count it, or they might be the ones who physically process your prescription before it's checked by the pharmacist to make sure that it's okay. But they're not the ones who are responsible for the accuracy of that at the end of the day. That falls on the pharmacist.
No, perfect. Thank you. That's really helpful to elaborate the role of a farm tech and how that relates to a career as a pharmacist. There was a follow-up question from the same individual about, do you need working hours or shadowing a pharmacist to get to pharmacy school? That wasn't one of the requirements you guys mentioned earlier, but I know you said it varies by school. Is there such a requirement, or does that help your application? So I'll turn it over to Rehem first, Sister Rehem. Sorry, Sister Maher.
Yes. So in regards to shadowing a pharmacist, it's really not necessary to do that or to get into pharmacy school. As I have mentioned, that there's a lot of individuals who actually don't even have medicine or pre-med as a track when they were completing their bachelor's. Anyone can do it and apply for the PCAT in pharmacy school. But would it help your application? Very much. I think it will allow you to get a better exposure to what to expect as you go through pharmacy school. And it actually also helps you in regards to like understanding certain things, because I know some individuals who never had any exposure to pharmacy before going into pharmacy school, and they had to start from like bottom. Whereas like myself, because I volunteered at a pharmacy, I kind of knew like the expectations are in a pharmacist because I shadowed one. I saw one firsthand, and I was basically molding myself into becoming one. But outside of that, to really answer the question, no.
Okay, perfect. So we talked a little bit about pharmacy, the different types of roles you can get into pharmacy. We talked about applying to pharmacy school. You even touched upon what are the different things you do in each of the years of pharmacy. I think Brother Shani touched upon that. Other things that people always ask about are, what is the starting pay like? What are the hours like? And I think you touched upon the hour aspect of it. So do you want to elaborate on those two things, the pay and the hours? So I'll start with Sister Manur first.
Okay. Once again, it varies depending on where you're working in pharmacy. And I say this because retail/community, which is Walgreens, CVS, Rite Aid, they're kind of known for not having the best hours, you can say. You play a major role in those pharmacies, but on top of that, the hours can be quite terrible. You might be working like 8 to 12 hour shifts. getting called in because someone called out. But with hospital, that's where it's a bit more smoother, where your hours are basically 8 hours a day, and that's the expectation. But when you talk about pharma, that's also very different, because I feel like in pharmaceutical, that's the one area in pharmacy where you actually take homework home. And I say this because you're involved in a lot of project management, involved in a lot of like what's called leading different projects, and conducting different things. Like I said, it's very complicated when it comes to pharma. There's a lot of different roles that you can play. So you have homework that you take home, whereas if you work in a community setting hospital, you don't. Once you work that shift, that's it. You can go home and forget about it, and then look forward to the next day. But outside of that, to answer the second question about pay, also varies. I can say out of pharma, hospital, and community, pharma is the most highest paying, and then you have hospital and community actually is very similar in regards to pay. I can't speak on hourly, or I can't give you an estimate. It varies, because I applied because I just graduated from pharmacy school, right? So I did apply because I wanted to have options. Pay changes every year. Someone who got hired last year, their pay might be different from what you might be getting offered this year or even next year. So also can't speak on that. But it's very common that pharmacists usually get paid around, I would say, $50 to like $70 or even more, depending on the setting.
Perfect. Thank you. Brother Shani, do you want to add about the hours or the pay?
Sure. So the hours, as Sister Manor mentioned, can be variable. It depends on the place. I mean, when I started, I worked overnights in a Walgreens, and I worked 7 days on. They were 10-hour shifts, and it was 10 p.m. to 8 a.m. And then I had 7 days in a row off. For some people, that works really great. For some people, it doesn't. I would say it's something everyone can maybe do for a couple of years, and it has a time limit. It takes a toll on a person. So you can even be in that kind of boat. You know, healthcare is not something that you can just turn off. Like, if somebody goes to the emergency room on Thanksgiving, there's a doctor there, there's a pharmacist there, there's nurses there. They're not like the corporate world where they're home for Thanksgiving or, whatever other holiday that other people might normally be home for. People love to ask all the time, like, hey, we're going to do something on Labor Day. Why don't you come by? I'm like, okay, but somebody's got to work there. So, we have to figure that out. So there's that aspect where, you are asked to cover some of that. And, of course, in the interests of fairness and everything else, you do cover quite a bit of those types of days where, people wouldn't typically work. For a lot of people, working weekends is a foreign concept. It's very normal in the pharmacy world because, again, it's not something that you can just shut the lights out and forget about it. People need medicine at all different times for all different reasons. And typically speaking, a pharmacist or someone is there to address those needs. Things like pharma and things are very different in the sense that your hours might not be traditional hours. You're typically a salaried employee. So like that dollars per hour thing might not necessarily apply, but you have a certain amount of work that needs to be done, and then you have deadlines and you have projects that need to be completed before things can move forward. So you have to get the amount of work that you have completed. If it takes you 40 hours, 50 hours, 70 hours, they're going to want that it's done according to that timeline. There's usually a lot of money at stake for those companies where they don't want to hear, sorry, I had this thing to take care of or that thing to take care of. The overall total compensation is definitely better in the pharma world. You have things that large companies can offer, like stock options and other types of compensation beyond just salary. People just tend to look at salary as like a number and compare that way. And there's a concept of total compensation where it's like, oh, okay, I get stock purchase options. I get some type of 401k retirement plan matching options. And all of that, somebody just getting out of school doesn't think about it as much, but everyone should, because no one is getting younger. So, it's something that everyone does need to plan for at some point or other. And the other thing I wanted to touch upon is that salaries in the community have actually decreased from when I started to now. So I still have a lot of friends in community and in independence. And what has happened is there's been a decrease in pay because retail businesses are not as profitable as they used to be. And pharmacy has a lot of external factors that also cut into what the profit would look like in that. So of course, if the business is making less money, then you're going to make less money.
Oh, that's all very helpful. So if someone is thinking about, should I pick pharmacy, other fields, what's an average pay like? I know it varies depending on what field you go into, but I think the vast majority of people who are pharmacists end up going either the hospital or the retail route from a numbers perspective. What is the average pay like that someone can look forward to when they graduate as a pharmacist? Do you have a range in New York?
So I actually want to say something about what Brother Shani brought up. Not going to lie. I want to be very honest as well, but I also don't want to scare the youth because pharmacy is great. Like, don't get me wrong, it is great. But don't let the pay disencourage you, okay, please? Because I promise you there's a lot of opportunities in pharmacy. The pay, it is very low right now. When I got my offer from Walgreens, for example, they did offer me $49 an hour. I know that sounds terrible compared to what it used to be 2 years ago. But at the same time, community retail isn't the only option. If you truly do, everyone thinks of their financial burden and so, right? So you do have to take that into consideration. There's a lot of other opportunities out there that you can apply to hospital. You can also go to other associate positions in pharma. They definitely do pay a lot better than community or retail, but your PharmD can take you places. Another thing I must mention that I truly believe on, we're in New York City. It is overly saturated. So when we talk about pay, especially as someone who just graduated from pharmacy school, I'm talking about pay according to what it's being offered in New York City. Now, if you're willing to leave New York, I promise you it's much better because the cost of living in New York is very high and the pay doesn't match that. So you have to take that into consideration. So if you're willing to take that step, then I promise you a lot of opportunities will also open up for you. So going back to the range though, as I mentioned earlier, it does range from 50 to 70 usually for community and hospital. But if you do pharma, it's much higher. And like Brother Shani mentioned, they even offer you stocks. And when you think of it long term, benefits truly matter. As someone who has basically just started adulting, I do consider that. I do look at the benefits because in the long run, you want insurance. You want to look at what they're offering you for your retirement. All those factors matter. It might not matter right now, but it will.
Perfect. So when you said 50 to 70, I know you were talking about $50 an hour before. Can you just help us think about that from an annual perspective so we could compare it to other careers? What would that translate to?
So I would say it's definitely, okay, when we talk about the hourly pay and make it sound like, oh, it's terrible, when you look at it in the annual pay, it does range from 90 and above, which is still very good. So like I said, it just depends on the location. Getting 90 and above based on how many hours you work in a community setting, it might not match that. A lot of people aren't happy with it. I can definitely say that. But like I said, if you leave New York, that will definitely allow you to live a very luxurious life. Go to Texas. Probably things would be very different for sure. But definitely 90 and above, though. I haven't seen anything below 90.
Brother Shine, do you want to add anything else before we move on to the next topic?
Yes. So one thing is that I would say saturation has happened in multiple places. So some people might, like for example, if you search on Google or whatever, you'll see articles that come up that will say like, this might not necessarily be the best time to become a pharmacist. I would still say that there are definite pros compared to some other fields from a salary perspective, in that sense, in that I graduated, I was 23 years old, and I was making much more than the 49 an hour that Walgreens offered at the time. I worked for Walgreens when I graduated. And when you're 23 and I was not married at the time and whatnot, that's quite a lot of money. And, you can obviously, make do some level of financial planning and those things at a young age to kind of set yourself up to be better off later on, because you have that high ceiling. Zuhaib, if I remember, you're an accountant by profession.
Yeah.
I'm sure you can explain much better than I can how compounding and things like that in terms of investments work, where if you're making money and you have a moderate lifestyle, you invest what you have left and you let time work for you, you can be fairly well off at a relatively young age, as opposed to starting at a lower salary, having to climb that salary ladder, and then finally you actually have the money, to start planning for your future in that capacity. So that I would say is definitely one definitive advantage. And I would say the disadvantages in most fields in pharmacy, like the community hospital, whatever, is that you kind of hit your ceiling early, and then it's just like 3% a year, keeping up with inflation kind of raises. It's not the type where you undergo like a radical title change and you get like an extra 20% raise. That's definitely the exception in the pharmacy profession. Like 1% at a maximum might achieve something of that sort. In pharma, it's much more possible to do that.
Perfect. No, that's really helpful to get an idea of the pay range you're looking at. So we said the pay range varies depending on what type of pharmacy you get into. If you look at retail pharmacy or working at a hospital, you're looking at somewhere in the range of $90,000 as starting, and the pay has a moderate increase year over year. So after 5 years, your pay is not going to significantly change, but the benefit is you start at a very high range. When you graduate right away, you can use that to pay off any loans from college for pharmacy school, and then you're free to kind of decide how you want to work and where you want to work. We also touched upon the fact that every state and city is different. There's more demand for pharmacy in some places than others, and the pay will be higher to match that. So you have to think about those factors for yourself. One question that Raham asked in the audience was, they looked at pharmacists in retail. She said they look stressed out. It seems like it's a hectic job. Would that be discouraging to some students? And what about the work-life aspect of it? And I'll just add on one aspect of work life is I'm a parent now. When I first started, I was not married and not have any kids. I could work a lot of hours. I enjoyed the work that I was doing as an accountant. For you guys, I'm sure it's the same. Like when you graduate fresh, like Brother Shani did, you had a lot of free time, you mentioned, compared to like now. So the value of free time maybe wasn't as important back then. Can you touch upon, like, for Muslims who have to go to Jummah, who have to pray, sisters who get married, they have family responsibilities, kids, what are the advantages of pharmacy or disadvantages of pharmacy from a work-life balance perspective? Brother Shani, do you want to take the first step? We can't hear you.
So some of the advantages would be that just as like if you really wanted to, you can work as much as you want, because you can find a place, like, let's just say I'm off tomorrow, I can call around to some store owners or do whatever. And if I wanted to work the extra day to make some extra money, I could do that. If I didn't want to, I don't have to. And similarly to that, if I say like, hey, I want to work in retail, but I only want to work part-time. Maybe, I'm just too tired to work 40 hours a week anymore or something like that. Those options exist in pharmacy, but there's no such thing as a part-time school teacher, a part-time, like rarely like a part-time lawyer or part-time in a lot of other professions. You're kind of all or nothing. In pharmacy, you don't have to be that. My wife is a pharmacist also. She works part-time for Mercy Medical Center, and she's been doing that, since before, the kids were born. And she has the ability to do that because of the nature of the profession. So there is some pros in like the work-life balance. The other things like Jummah, you have, like any other job, you have to, negotiate those things with your employer. If you don't ask, of course, you're not going to get anything. If you do ask, maybe some places might say no, but you will eventually find somebody who's willing to work with you in some capacity to say, oh, well, you can't work Fridays, but maybe you can work Saturdays for me because maybe there's a segment of the Jewish population or something else that doesn't want to work Saturdays, or whatever the case might be. There's always a way to work those things out, and you just have to have those conversations with, your employers and stuff to figure those things out.
Perfect. Thank you. Sister Manur, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, sure. Okay, so I want to actually answer that question that I see right there because I love talking about this. So you are correct that retail pharmacists do look very stressed out. I worked at retail for 3 years. I just left this May, actually. But just know one thing, it's not really pharmacy or pharmacist. It's more of the corporation that you're working for. So when you graduate from pharmacy school, right, you should also look at the company that you're working for, because that matters. It matters how they respect you, your profession, how they take your mental and emotional health into consideration. And to be honest, most of these companies, CVS, Walgreens, Rite Aid, the list goes on, they don't. They care about making money. So that's why they look really stressed out, because they're being given responsibilities because these corporations think that pharmacists are money-making machines, which we are, because these corporations wouldn't be there if it wasn't for pharmacy. But outside of that, that shouldn't be discouraging, because like we said, that's not where pharmacy ends. I know so many individuals that worked 2 years after leaving pharmacy school at these retail, and they dealt with it. They dealt with that stress, paid off their loans though, and then they got better jobs. They went into managed care. Managed care is another field that you can go into pharmacy. Or they went to pharmaceutical. They went into hospital. There's so much more you can do. You just gotta suck it up for those 1 or 2 years. I promise it does get better. It's also depending on the person. If you want more, or if you want better, or if you're willing to deal with it. So it also depends on the individual at the end of the day. Now, to answer the second question, I am not married. I don't have kids. I am 23. So I might not be able to give too much advice in regards to family and such. But I can definitely say that I have worked with a lot of pharmacists, right, in Walgreens, as well as hospital right now, that are part DM, which basically means is that they don't work their full 40 hours. They probably work 2 to 3 times a week at the hospital or even at Walgreens, and then they spend the rest of the days with their family. So that's something that individuals can think of doing when you want to start a family and you want to give that time to the family. But there is also that cut and pay. So it's all about asking yourself that question, whether or not if you want to do it. But in regards to the work and life balance, like I mentioned, hospital and community settings are the two professions in pharmacy where you don't bring homework home. And why do I keep saying that? It's because the other professions, even managed care, as well as working in pharmaceutical companies, you do have projects, deadlines, as Brother Shani mentioned, that you do have to complete that you're probably going to be working on after leaving those work hours. So there might be a little mix of work and life balance when you work in those settings. But outside of that, it's actually not that bad. Once you leave work and clock out, that's it. No one's going to call you. No one's going to reach out to you unless, there's a problem. But that doesn't happen very often. So you're still able to make that money, still make patient care impact, and still live your best life. So it's all about the willingness and being passionate about the career and being passionate about wanting to do the most that you can.
Perfect. So we have about 15 minutes left. So I just wanted to make sure I emphasize to the audience again, if you have any questions, this is the time to ask. Don't wait. Whatever's on your mind, whatever you want to know about pharmacy, we have two experts here who can share their experience. In the time that we have left, I had a few other questions that I thought made sense to go through. One of the things I wanted to touch upon is pharmacy. When I was graduating high school, that was around 2003. We were always told pharmacy is the fastest growing, one of the fastest growing careers. They were opening pharmacy schools. They were turning out a lot of pharmacy students. What is the field like now, given the COVID environment, given changes in regulatory, other things that are going on? I think you touched upon some of these topics. What are some things that people should be prepared for in terms of what is pharmacy? How's it going to look 5-10 years from now? So I'll turn it over to Brother Shani first.
Okay. So yeah, I guess when you were in school, Brother Zuhaib, you let the secret out because a lot of people applied to pharmacy school, and definitely a saturation level in quite a few areas has been reached, and that has made it rather challenging for some pharmacists to be able to find jobs. Like some of the people listening who have friends that are pharmacists, maybe they're struggling in that capacity, like, oh, I've been having trouble getting a job for a while or something like that. And that's happened to a lot of people, unfortunately. And one of the things that has happened, like with the saturation, is that the employer has been able to demand more from the pharmacist, whether it be extra certifications, extra degree, extra workload, because they know that, let's just say tomorrow, I'm at a Walgreens or I'm at a whatever, and I decide, you know what, this is too hectic. I can't do this. There's somebody else ready to take that spot. Like they know, okay, Shani doesn't want to do it. There's somebody waiting. So they're not really worried about that happening. Just to touch on the brother's question also from before in terms of like it being hectic and stuff, it has gotten more hectic, and because like the margins have shrunk and expansion has generally slowed. When I was in school, Walgreens was averaging about opening like 1.1, 1.2 stores a day across the country. That's not, necessarily the same rate of expansion happening, particularly in my area. That was happening before, because retail in general has taken a hit. Hospitals, there's not that many new hospitals that open in that sense. There are other areas in which pharmacies can work, outpatient clinics and things like that have opened. So there are opportunities in some of those venues, but I would say that because right now, what would happen before is when a lot of pharmacists would graduate, they were kind of going more towards the retail direction, because retail marketed very well to the graduate. And people thought, hey, this is the way to go. I'm going to go to CVS. I'm going to go here or there because I met them and I like them and all that kind of stuff. And now with that slowing down, a lot of these new graduates are fighting over fewer availability of jobs. And just as a side note, I would say that, people think that, okay, I'm going to get my pharmacy degree and that's going to be where, my education stops. And I would say that you don't have to do that. You can go on to get an MBA. A pharma company would love somebody who not only has the pharmacy background, but also has the business background. Or if I went to law school and I was writing patents for a drug company, like, because I understand both the pharmacy business and what I need to protect about a drug in a patent, I am much more marketable than somebody who has only a law degree, not only, but not the health science background that goes with it, but they are a patent lawyer without that similar background. I can set myself up in different ways with more education to have opportunities that are way beyond the scope of, what people think of like a pharmacist doing, essentially. And at that point, you wouldn't necessarily be a pharmacist anymore, but that background would open doors for you that otherwise would be very, very difficult.
Perfect. I wanted to bring up a question that Asma asked. And Asma asked, do you advise pharmacy students to work as a pharm tech or focus on their studies? So do you have any advice for people trying to figure out what to do? I'll turn over to Sister Amanur.
Okay, so as someone who just graduated out of pharmacy school and saturation being a huge problem, especially for my class, the class prior to me, and the class that are coming in, I can tell you experience matters. And I say this because networking, your experience are going to get you places more than your GPA. Yes, graduate pharmacy school, do really well, obviously. But I can tell you from my experience, I'm doing a residency after completing 4 years of pharmacy school. It's getting very hard to even get a residency nowadays or even a fellowship, okay? And I can say, alhamdulillah, the reason that I am where I am is because of my experiences, which speak for themselves. So throughout those 4 years that I was at pharmacy school, I worked as a pharmacy intern because that's what you are once you enter pharmacy school. And those hours and the different positions that I've held in retail and hospital and independent, on top of the things that I've done on campus, being a leader, and also successfully completing pharmacy school, it helped me get residency. And to really go back on the saturation part, yes, it is very saturated. It's making it difficult to get jobs, but that's why there's all these postgraduate opportunities that are also opening up. But they are also competitive. And the way to stand out for these postgraduate opportunities is to build your resume and your CV. And just graduating pharmacy school is not enough because everyone graduates pharmacy school. It's about what you did in those 4 years completing pharmacy school that will help you separate from the other 200 people that you're graduating with. And when I first heard that statement, it stuck to me because that's so true. Like, even if I have individuals who were basically like straight A students, and then I'm going to be very honest, I was not the most straight A student in pharmacy school. I definitely struggled. But it's the 4 years or even the 6 years, because I did a 6-year program, what I did in those 6 years that helped me get a residency, that helped me get how far I am. And that also allows you to open up more doors. To answer your question, I definitely encourage it. I advise it. But at the same time, mental health is so important. Please do not overwork yourself trying to be that perfect candidate or trying to be that perfect student. You have to take your emotional and mental health, mental well-being into account. So while going through pharmacy school, definitely give yourself the time to focus on maybe, just going out, watching a little bit there, doing something a bit of everything. It's not all about just focusing on just getting almost every experience out there or being perfect in studies. It's okay. And I personally, I go by the statement in my life, imperfection is beauty. And I can truly say that. I am not the most perfect individual, but at the end of the day, my imperfections are the reasons where I am today.
I think that's really helpful. So we have about 6 minutes left. I wanted to kind of turn it over to each of you for 3 minutes. If you were to go back to yourself and travel in time and meet yourself a few years ago, what is advice that you would give to yourself or to a younger cousin or a younger friend who's thinking about pharmacy? What do you wish you knew? What are pieces of advice that you have seen that people are able to get ahead? So I'll turn it over to Brother Shani first.
Okay. As far as advice for like a younger self or something, I would say that trying to do things like grad school and things like that, take your couple of years, work, build your network, do all of that, but don't take that off the table. Like, it would definitely helps to differentiate you later on, and it opens up the other doors for you. And don't rely on the schools to teach you everything, because they don't. Look at what your other opportunities are. Like most schools don't do, they give you an education, but they don't necessarily prepare you for life after college. And those are two very different things. So know what general things you might want to do and what kind of steps you would need to take to get there. Now, with information being as abundant as it is, it's very easy for someone to find that information. So people just need to look and just realize that just because they went to school for something, that doesn't necessarily mean that they were taught everything about that profession. Like in pharmacy, there's a lot that the school doesn't teach. And it's important for you to look to proactively fill in those gaps yourself.
And then Sister Manur?
So to be honest, the advice I would give to myself from 3 years ago: stop stressing out so much. That's what I would tell myself. Just, you're gonna be fine. But to the youth, though, something I would definitely tell you guys is that focus on the big picture, really. And I say this because I'm just gonna go back to the same thing again. Experience matters, and let your experiences speak for themselves. And they also allow you to open up new opportunities, to find out things that you never knew that existed, or even get your hands dirty into things that you thought that you didn't like. And I say this because I am doing a residency, which is very clinical, but because I was introduced to pharma in my 6 years in pharmacy school, by the way, that the school never talked about. It was more of me getting involved on campus and talking to people, people that were older than me, people that had already graduated, that were working in pharma. I realized that I really liked it. And inshallah, my goal is, after completing residency, is actually to go into pharmaceutical. And I am not letting residency or any of that stop me. It's all about also ambitious. If you truly are ambitious, go for it. Do what you like, do what you love. Something else that I'm really passionate about is public health. And inshallah, my goal also down the road is to take this passion of mine with pharmacy and public health and bring it together. So if there's something that you like outside of pharmacy, don't give up on it. Don't worry. Like, you can always go back to it. The world won't revolve around pharmacy if you do decide to take the pharmacy route. It would actually open up more doors. It would actually allow you to separate yourself once again from all these other individuals, because I truly believe that for my year and the years to come, it truly matters on how you separate yourself from other individuals that you're graduating with. I mean, this mattered even years prior, or I believe that Brother Sean, you can also agree to that, but I think it matters even more now because of the job market, because of these postgraduate opportunities. And if anyone has any questions or concerns about pharmacy school or about these postgraduate opportunities like residency, I will definitely provide Brother Zuhaib with my email, which you guys can reach out to me about questions or concerns that you have, and I would be more than happy to connect with people and really guide them, because I love doing that. I'm very passionate about giving back, and that's why I'm also here today.
So we had a question coming in from Asma. She was saying, can you guys provide a means of contacting you? So one thing I always say is, if you guys are comfortable, you can try to find them on LinkedIn and connect with them directly on LinkedIn, and they can accept your request, and then you can communicate with each other. The second option is in the bottom of the screen where it says muslimyouthmentors@gmail.com and info@masjidhamza.com. If you email us at those two email addresses, we can then reach out to Brother Shani and Sister Manur, and we can connect you with them directly. So those are the ways you can reach out and connect with them. And then we have about a minute left. Is there anything else you guys wanted to say as final thoughts? We have like 20 seconds each. So Brother Shani.
Sure. So let's do a quick pros and cons. Like, pros are, you can find your work-life balance because you can work more and you can work less. The salary has become kind of like a pro and a con, because like you hit your ceiling You kind of stay there, but you hit it young. So you have the advantage of trying to use that at a young age to either open up other opportunities for you or to plan better for, your own, your future. That's like a very quick pros and cons. I mean, the other cons some people complain about in the community are like the external stressors, whether it's coming from your company or from people kind of blaming you for things that are outside of your control, like cost of medication or certain other issues that you don't have control over. You're just the person face to face with that person, so they're kind of going to vent it on you, and you just have to take that with a bit of understanding and realize where they're coming from.
Perfect. Sister Manur, in 10 seconds or less, any final thoughts?
If you're looking forward to pursuing pharmacy, regardless of the market saturation, I highly encourage it. It is a very, very, very rewarding career. And alhamdulillah, I'm so happy to see where I am. And I really look forward to the future.
MashaAllah. Thank you so much. That's a great note to leave it on. And thank you everybody for joining us. And this will be saved as a recording and up on YouTube and Facebook, so you can share it with other people who might be interested in pharmacy. And thank you everybody again. And we'll have our next session in 2 weeks. Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum.